Welcome back. You listen to Real Estate Radio San Antonio. And please visit our website at realestateradiosa.com. Give us your comments and questions of what you want to hear on the radio. We want this to be your show. And right now we're visiting with our guest is Greg Drott of Allstate Insurance. And we're talking about dwelling insurance, personal insurance, things for on the inside of the home. And so Greg was talking about the difference of the dwelling and the coverage for your personal.
Right. What people don't realize is that when you have a loss, let's say a house burns down completely, okay? When we're talking about personal property, I like to joke, but it goes down to all the way down to that half-used tube of toothpaste in the bathroom. You've got to replace that. So that again, I mentioned earlier about making sure you have that replacement cost on the policy, because you're not going to go out and buy a half-used tube of toothpaste. You're going to have to go buy a brand new tube of toothpaste, and that all adds up on that. So one of the other things is your other structures. Again, I was talking about the dwelling being held up in my hand. Other structures, most policies will have a certain percentage covering other structures. Those are things that are not attached to the home. So if you've got a detached carport or your fence or a tool shed in the back, that's the coverage that's going to have their limits for those items. Another coverage that most have is the loss of use. So if you're out of your home because of a claim, a covered loss, and you're incurring that expense, let's say you have a kitchen fire and you're out of the house for a couple of weeks while they're redoing your kitchen, and now you're living out of a hotel and you're eating out every night. That's where your loss of use or your additional living expenses comes in to cover those expenses now that you didn't have, but now you do have because of a claim.
Well, this is kind of interesting, this point here, and I think about this as you're talking, Greg. So if the house burns down, you've got fire insurance, but if you don't have a good policy that covers for you to stay in a hotel while they're rebuilding that structure or cleaning it or whatever needs to be done in that time to rehab that house, then you're making your mortgage payment and you're making your hotel payment, correct?
Or you're irritating your family and friends who are ready to kick you out of the house.
So that's what that does. So while you're out of the house, it pays for your living expenses at a remote location.
Right. Any of that additional living expense that you didn't have but now have because of that covered loss.
Yeah, I think sometimes maybe people, and myself included, just kind of slide right over that and don't think about that. And that's part of the insurance that's so important, and that's why somebody like yourself, an insurance agent, that really cares about, explains that and says it. So.
Right. Two of the other important coverages that a policy should have on that is your personal liability. Again, liability coverage is going to protect you. I call it asset protection because that's really whether you're talking about your auto or your home or any other type of liability insurance, that is what it's doing. It's protecting the assets that you have built up over your lifetime, that you've worked hard, you saved. Because if through your negligence you hurt somebody else and they sue you and they get a judgment against you, what you really want to do is your liability insurance is protecting those assets so that it doesn't come in and I jokingly call it keep the lawyers out of your wallet coverage because that's what it is.
So what does that cover? I mean, does it cover if a dog goes out and bites somebody while they're on your yard?
Yeah, again, depending on policies, because there are some policies, some animals are it's gotten to the point now where there are some breeds of dogs that some insurance companies just won't cover, and they'll actually write an exclusion under the policy so that that exposure, because it's just too great of an exposure.
Right.
I can see that.
Okay, so that's all included, and that's one of the things that you talk about is all these different things, so that if someone's dogs bite them, they could be covered, they may not be covered, so they really have to. Sometimes we just go. I see people that even come through our office that just get that policy and they say, okay, this is what I need. Here's a certain amount of money now. Let's move on. But they haven't really done due diligence to find out what's covered, and it can be catastrophic down the road. So slow down a little bit.
That liability. So say you're entertaining and someone trips over the rug and breaks their wrist on their fall. Is that where that would come in?
Actually, there's two coverages that could come in. The first one is your guest medical payment coverage. Generally, most policies will have at least $500, and you can increase that up to $5,000. But I kind of call that the go away, don't sue me coverage, because that coverage is a no-fault coverage. So you come in the house, no matter how it happened, you have medical bills, I have that coverage. we're going to get your medical bills coverage. Because again, remember, with liability, in order for you to be liable for somebody's damages, you have to be negligent. So you talked about the carpet. You know, somebody could be walking out of the house and trip over their own feet, fall down, split their head, go to the emergency room. You didn't do anything wrong. Yes, can they file a claim against you? Absolutely. Will they collect something under that? If you're not negligent, again, we got to put our hands in the jury sometimes, but in order for them to collect, you have to be negligent. So under the liability coverage, that's what's going to protect you against things that you do that you're negligent. Guest medical protection, no fault coverage. Medical bills incurred because something happened at or on the residence, you're going to have coverage for that regardless of whether there's fault or not.
That's good.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
kind of explains. I really hadn't even thought about it that way or even known that. But look, that's. I'm as you're talking, I'm kind of visualizing my policy as I go down, and I think, okay, that's what that line means.
You can only
5,000
imagine
here, and yeah.
So let's all go get our policy and start looking.
After 19 years in claims, there's lots of stories.
So if someone has a question on their policy, can they call you in your office and you guys review that, even if it's not yours?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's good. Remember, that's Greg Drott, Allstate Insurance, and he's got offices all over San Antonio. So
if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Real Estate Radio San Antonio, and that's realestateradiosa.com. We're talking with Greg Drott here from Allstate Insurance. So, well, let's talk about...
Well, you know, there's one thing I just want to, while we're still on that thing, tell me a little bit about umbrella policies or blanket policies that, you know, you hear $1 million here, $2 million, and tell me a little bit about that. So a homeowner, how that applies and what that really covers.
Okay, and remember what I said about liability insurance being asset protection, because as you acquire those assets in your life, you're going to want to make sure that you have enough insurance. So when something bad does happen, again, you might be driving home and you drive through a red light and hit another vehicle, or you're trimming the tree and you drop a branch on your neighbor's, head and you hurt them. Again, people can. In Texas, I like to joke that in Texas our tort system is anybody can sue anybody for anything, and you really don't have to have a reason until it gets before the judge and the jury. You're in a lawsuit, so you're going to have to protect yourself. So what an umbrella policy does basically is, under your homeowner's policy, we talk about your liability insurance. So you'll have, let's say you have $300,000 of liability protection, but let's say you have $1 million of assets out there, property, bank accounts, real estate, and those are all things that they can get to. It used to joke that they couldn't get your house from you, but in Texas, what ends up happening is, while they may not be able to kick you out of the house, if they get a judgment against you, they can put a lien or a judgment against your house. And until that judgment is satisfied, again, you're never going to be able to pass that house on to your heirs, or not going to be able to sell it till that judgment's taken care of. So what ends up happening is, let's say a serious loss occurs, whether it's in an auto or at the house. Your auto insurance or your homeowner's insurance is going to be primary. They're going to put their limits out there. So let's take the home, and I've got $300,000 of liability protection there, but I've got a loss that is going to exceed that. Okay, if I don't have anything above and beyond that homeowner's policy, my assets are now exposed. So what that umbrella policy does is it opens up, just like an umbrella, over any of those other policies that you have when the loss is so great. So it adds another $1 million on top of that $300,000 that I have. So now I've got $1.3 million in protection. Or you can go $2 million, $3 million, $5 million, whatever you need to protect your assets.
Good.
That's interesting. So, but Stan, didn't you have a question about some golf ball coverage?
Well, I do. I just want to make sure I don't jump in here too soon. But I mean, that's kind of like, it really does. I mean, I've always wondered. I've never really asked anybody, Greg. And I mean, I'm a big golf advocate, and I know you are, because we played golf together out at the club. And I just have these questions because I always get nervous if not that I've ever hit a ball out of the fairway or in somebody's backyard, because I would never do that. But if for some reason somebody did, and they broke a window, what happens?
All right.
You run? I mean, besides you pack up your clubs and you run. We don't want to do that, but we assume the responsibility. What takes place? Are you covered on insurance on that, or how's that work?
Yeah, actually, that's actually a fun question to answer. Remember you have liability. And liability insurance is going to protect you against your negligence. Okay. So, but again, remember what the definition of negligence is. Right. That's the failure of what a reasonable and prudent person would do. Now, again, with a game like yours, I think a reasonable, prudent person might give it up. Just kidding. But no, in Texas, it's kind of interesting because when I was in claims, now it may have changed because I've been gone for about 5 years now, but it used to be that if you built your house on a golf course, there's what's called assumption of risk, and it basically says if you build a house on a golf course, you can expect to be hit by a golf ball. So, so really, there is no negligence, and you really don't owe that person a new window. Wow. However, most insurance policies do have what's called damage to property of others, which generally says something like, at your request, we will pay up to $500 each time an insured person causes property damage to somebody else's property. So that coverage was designed exactly for the situation that you're talking about, where there is no negligence for most people. Yeah. But you would be able to cover that person's window on there, and that way you stay friends with your neighbors.
Yeah. Now, what if you hit your neighbor with a ball? Is that going to a whole different ball game there then?
We get back into that discussion of negligence on there. If a person is standing out there in their backyard on a golf course and you just happen to pull your ball into the backyard and hit them, you got to go back to, were you negligent? And again, the person assuming the risk by living on a golf course standing back there. Again, it's important to if I were standing on the tee box and said, "Hey, watch me cut this corner. I'm going to hit the ball over this guy's house." Now there again, I might have just introduced negligence into that, wherein the liability coverage I would probably have to defend me and settle me on a claim like that.
Well, I got some bad visualizations on that statement there, Greg. Well, we're going to take a break here in just a moment. Where you're listening, if you just joined us or if you stay with us, this is Real Estate Radio San Antonio. I'm getting tongue-tied here, so I'm going to maybe have to let Carla finish this up. But you're listening to Real Estate Radio San Antonio on KLUP. We'll be right back with Greg. We're going to finish out some of these really important questions on is my golf cart insured?